Buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por su atención. Gracias al PAC y por este SITAC, que siempre es un evento de la mayor importancia cultural para el rubro del arte contemporáneo. Me toca presentar a tres personas realmente fabulosas. Voy a leer lo que Shuddha escribió para este panel, que se llama Mensajes para el futuro, cápsulas de tiempo. Dos curadores y un artista hablarán sobre lo que significa dejar mensajes para el futuro y al mismo tiempo recibir notas de futuros aplazados o cancelados. La práctica de Carlos Mota plantea la pregunta acerca de las relaciones entre el pasado y el presente. Theodor Ringborg, por otro lado, acaba de curar recientemente una exposición sobre cápsulas del tiempo que será inaugurada dentro de 50 años. Cosmin Costinas ha trabajado en una exposición basada en la narración de sueños y esperanzas de los países en vías de desarrollo. Vamos a empezar con la contribución de Theodor. Theodor, a través de su práctica curatorial, ha tratado temas como el espacio, la relación del hombre con la muerte y lo infinito, y la representación artística de la guerra durante diferentes periodos de la historia. Algunos de sus proyectos incluyen Spatial Works, Face Your Demos y Fallout, War and Conflict in the British Council Collection. Durante 2010 curó exposiciones en varios espacios como la Galería Milliken de Estocolmo y la Galería Whitechapel de Londres. Cedo entonces la palabra a Theodor Ringborg.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me here. I recently, as was just described, curated an exhibition that was based on time capsules. And what a time capsule is essentially a box that you fill with stuff for later. It's a message in a bottle for the future. And I will show you one image, if we can get the image. It's in. There it is. So this is me curating the exhibition, simply, eloquently. And you can't see it, but it's in the dead of night on the 18th of June, 2011. And what's in the hall is the time capsules. And I make no claims of originality. There's thousands of time capsules out there, and many artists have used them, and science, and you could do them just for fun, for the spectacle they bring, or the sort of scientific research. And but what they do, what a time capsule does, is that they store for posterity a selection of objects thought to be representative of life at a particular time. And such vessels have had the dual purpose of engendering participants to ponder their own cultural era and consider those to come. So what we get when we select something and sequester it, we don't have to bury it, but you can sort of hide it for a designated time. What you get is a now that is more now than usual, and a then that is more then than normal, because it's production and anticipation and duration, and we sort of worked with this within this exhibition. But I'll track back a little bit to tell you the entire story. I was a co-curator of the Nordic Biannual, which takes place in Moss, Norway. I was one out of 5 curators, which is quite a complicated situation to do. I had this time capsule idea beforehand, but never really had the opportunity to actually produce or sort of do it. And for this particular exhibition, for the Nordic Biennale, it just seemed to work so well, because right outside one of the venues was the protected grounds, which means that nothing can happen here. In the place where we've buried these time capsules, nothing can happen. And it just sort of seemed to fit. So I invited 5 artists to do this, and it was Rax Media Collective, Jason Dodge, Eli Ga, Rosalina Shashibi, and Leif Elgren. And there's one more capsule, which is a mediation capsule, in case I would sort of demise. And these capsules are supposed to be buried for 50 years. So in 50 years' time, we'll have this exhibition of something. And to add to this, only the artists know what they've made. So I don't know, and no one else knows. So it's sort of, you come to this point where it's about imagination of the future, 50 years in the future. Think 18th of June, 2061, and then you know that, Rax Media Collective has made a work for this occasion. What you do is that you go back to their previous works, and you try to sort of figure out what they have done for this, what art we will see in the future. The idea of art in the future is make-believe, just like anything else. And this was here the experiment. And I think, to be completely honest, not enough time has passed to actually talk about this. I haven't really digested this. I haven't really understood it fully yet. And it's very difficult for me to talk about it so soon. It's only been 6 months. We have 49.5 years left in wait. And I think what I'm trying to say is that I don't know if I'll ever be sort of ready with this project. I mean, the time capsules are underground now. They're in wait. And it's a sort of wait and see question. And I know that I run the risk of seeming like a sort of brooding Bergman-esque Swede burying things in the ground out of sort of a disbelief of the present. But the fact is that my occupation as a curator so often deals with objects in time and space, an immediate time and space. And I think the idea of the time capsules was because I wanted to get away from this. I mean, in a sense, I mean, this idea to make an exhibition more now than others, but also more then than usual, and that other sort of realm became the future. The display of objects in time and space is perhaps not necessarily an approach in need to be modified. However, I would argue that that the time capsule as a methodology excites subjects that exhibitions utilizing more sort of traditional presentations are often unable to equally distinctly articulate. This experiment, this time capsule, it provokes considerations regarding what the contemporary is and what constitutes an exhibition intended to introduce it, as well as it encourages a sort of spatial temporal reflection when you're there. And I'm sort of assuming that none of you have been to this small city in Norway where this is happening. But it is quite an exciting experience. I mean, I say so because I'm a part of it and I bury these things. But when you're there, there is I mean, time is never felt so extraordinarily as in a place where nothing happens. I mean, we wait, and it's an anxious wait, because I'm very curious to what the artists have made. And I feel like I made a mistake by saying that, don't tell me. But however, I have to add, they don't actually know exactly where I buried them, so we might be able to sort of figure something out. I'm looking at you, Rax. But this is, I have to sort of make clear that it's neither sort of a critique nor a revolution against the more accustomed manner in which art and displays, and I have no intentions to bury every single exhibition I do in the future. However, I mean, I see it as a corresponding way to create an experience. It complements objects in time and space and puts forward a sort of alternative way and an alternative participation of the viewer, because this transient visual encouragement that we constantly get through exhibitions, to remove that and sort of, in a very mean way, force you to wait for this, force you to wait for what has happened now. The artwork has been produced now, but the initial reception is 50 years ahead. And this space, these 50 years, I really do believe that something might happen. But yet again, I don't know what might happen. I mean, it might be a total failure. I don't think so, but it might. I mean, I have to open up for that possibility. 50 years is, in terms of time capsule time, and I say time capsule time because they usually stretch for millennia, or at least 100 years. 50 years is quite a brief period, and I feel like I need to explain why I said 50 years for this project. It's because some of us will still be around to see the time capsules be open, and I'm not wanting to rub this in, but some of us won't. I'll be 78, I might make it. So 50 years is this sort of generational shift. This is our shared time. Some of you might pass on and others not. Without trying to rub it in. So this shared existence, it's also, I think, quite important. And some of the artists have commented on this, that even though this is not the last work of art that they ever make, this might be the last work of art that we see of them, simply. Yes, I think that would be my main point. That it is a mystery. It is a mystery for me, even though I was so involved, and I think it's a mystery for the artists as well. What this could be in 50 years and what it is now. And to make clear, because one of the most common questions I get when I talk about this is that how can you ensure that this is actually going to be dug up? And for this, I want to recommend the International Time Capsule Society of Oglethorpe University, Atlanta. It's a wonderfully strange institution, but they have registers of time capsules. And if you do a time capsule, it's very important that you actually register it, because you can note where it is, and if you know what's in it, you can note what's in it and who's responsible for digging it up, and names and contacts and so on and so forth. Because the main risk, and this might sound incredible, the main risk for a time capsule is that it's forgotten. I mean, I might actually forget about this. Or if I'm in an accident, who knows? You might not, none of you might care. So I have to sort of ensure that this tattoos are also very nice. If you tattoo sort of longitude and latitude, then it's a constant reminder. But I would, in fact, encourage you to try to make time capsules yourself. It could be sort of 6 months or a year or a millennia, because it is a fascinating experience of sending something to the future, and the process of selecting what you want to send and what you then out of this start to believe and what you start to think about the future is I think, a very important experience to have. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time, and thank you also for having me.
Thanks, Theo. Ahora vamos a pasar con Cosmin Costinas. Cosmin es autor y curador. Realizó estudios en Historia del Arte en la Universidad de Babeș-Bolyai en Cluj-Napoca, Rumania. Él trabajó como curador en el Basis voor Academic Kunstwerk del 2008 al 2011 y actualmente acaba de ser nombrado director de Parasite en Hong Kong. Ha publicado numerosos textos en diferentes revistas internacionales y en 2006 fue miembro del equipo editorial del proyecto de la revista Documenta 12. Bueno, a ver, paso la palabra a Cosmin.
Thank you. Thank you, Shuddha, for inviting me to speak here. and for putting together this very challenging proposition, and for doing it in the spectral, doubtful, and even melancholic, in benignly melancholic way that I always admired in your work and in your persona. And thanks to the amazing team of SITAC for their marvelous work in making this an impeccable event. It is striking to arrive from the city of Hong Kong to a cultural event in Mexico City. One cannot but compare the efforts made by the former to build a cultural infrastructure fit for the new long count, with the grand institutions of culture produced by a century of Francophile aspiration and 90 years of pseudo-socialist statism in Mexico. And one cannot possibly arrive at a satisfactory conclusion after this comparison. But let's get on to business. I will briefly review here an exhibition I curated last autumn, an exhibition that was meant to be a snapshot of gazes, of ideas, of forms, and of representations of the geopolitical structure of the world at the dawn of the new long count. And from a very personal perspective, it was the last exhibition done in Europe before leaving it. The exhibition was at BAK, at Basis voor Actuele Kunst in Utrecht, in the Netherlands, and it was called Spacecraft Icarus 13, Narratives of Progress from Elsewhere. Icarus 13 is the name of the first space journey to the sun, led by an Angolan mission. Such a statement strikes us as absurd, perhaps even more so because of the improbable flag flown by the mission than by its inhospitable destination. It is nonetheless the subject of a work by artist Kiluanji Kiahenda from 2007 called Icarus 13, a photographic series that appears to document a successful space mission, one bearing the uncompromising name of the Greek anti-hero who tried to fly and was punished for his hubris when his wax wings melted upon coming too close to the sun. But beyond irony, poetry, and a mix of pure fiction and real historical landmarks, this work speaks volumes about the history of dreams of progress, disillusion, resilience, and resistance that has characterized the post-independence decades in Angola. This history is closely linked to the experience of being one of the countries that fell both outside and in the middle of the dueling US and Soviet blocs during the Cold War. In Henda's work, the set of the mission is not a set at all, but is rather comprised of real places and venues throughout Angola. Now I disclose the surprise. Icarus 13, so the space shuttle that you see here, is in fact an unfinished mausoleum built by the Soviets during the Cold War. The Astronomy Observatory is another unfinished structure. This time it's a cinema from the colonial era, so before. And the setting of the launch scene is actually an image from celebrations that erupted when Angola's national football team qualified for the 2006 World Cup. And this playful amalgamation of different eras, historical intensities, from tragedy to celebration, and high and low brow context is a powerful foray into key aspects of varied understandings of progress, from the post-war era up to today, from diverse past sources of articulation to different narratives that center around it, and from this belief to an insistence in claiming its urgency. So this was the work that somehow formed the basis of the exhibition and lent its title. But there is another image, a ghost from another era that hovered over the exhibition. And I might say it was a sort of a skeleton in the exhibition's closet. It's an imposing bluestone figure, an allegory of Europe, by Hendrik van der Eijde, made in 1924, as part of a series of sculptures representing the 5 inhabitant continents that are placed along the columns in the main hall of Utrecht's post office. The representation stems from an era when Europe was confident about its historical march towards ever greater progress and world domination. As you can see, the figure of Europe is holding its hands firmly on the globe. Interesting to say that all the other figures have nothing in their hands. But was at the same time in constant need of finding and representing a backward, uncivilized, and ahistorical other, in order for its own progress to appear evident by contrast. This mirroring game has survived in many discourses about culture and geopolitics. But what has changed dramatically is the position of the subjects and their placement around the mirrors. Tellingly, as the exhibition was on view, so last autumn, the post office in Utrecht was closed down as part of a nationwide program of privatizations. And this was only one part of an even larger program of dismantling the welfare state model that has been the pride of Europe's self-representation as a beacon of prosperity during the second half of the 20th century. And I would say that Europe's amnesia about this fact is only comparable to its historical blindness in embellishing this slow but steady process of decay as a sign of a new and different kind of progress, one that is now animating the neoliberal logics and way of thinking. Progress became a key drive and a very much ideologically charged instrument during the Cold War era, often being the main aim and the very declared purpose of politics and of thinking about society. It was, however, spelled out in very different terms, depending on which side of the Cold War divide one was finding oneself on. In the West, progress was articulated as the push for economic growth, for reconstruction in Western Europe, and immediately after the war, and the consolidation of American imperial power also in the time. In the East, one pointed to advancement towards a communist future as the main mark of progress. And in the rest of the world, non-aligned or different theories of development abounded. Now, whatever the ideological formulation, this modern ethos of gazing towards a future that would necessarily have to be an improvement over the present, had a particular impact on the world, and especially on the part of the globe that was not clearly integrated in one of the two competing blocks. Now, in the past 20 years, a lot of uncertainties about the directions along which progress was imagined have disappeared. The demise of communism, as well as the marginalization of politics in favor of an economy-centered discourse, performed by ever more powerful neoliberal regimes, fractured previously dominant articulations of progress into a kaleidoscope of narratives, of visions, of constructions and discourses, often ambivalent and very much ideologically hybrid. The Soviet bloc and its particular version of state socialism collapsed the most dramatically, of course. But the shock waves it sent reverberated in various ways, not just in the former Eastern bloc, but also in the West and the rest of the world. The Soviet-inspired models of progress adopted in many recently independent countries, with their centralized economies and import substitution industrial policies, were the first to crumble. Different so-called third ways were suspended by the dead end of the second way and the emergence of the only way of neoliberal capitalism. And the perceived victory of this version of progress made neoliberalism, with its dubious ideas of trickle-down economics and the dismantling of the welfare state, the default choice for most of the world. What we can all recognize, can we? Iconic Andy Warhols in Chiapas. Now, the image, when judged, and it's very important now to say that, you know, the reading that I'm talking about was from the perspective of somebody doing an exhibition in Utrecht. Showing it here brings particular value to it, I think, but of course the set of references implied are definitely different. But seen from that, you know, nice provincial city of Utrecht in that exhibition, it's a clear reference to the revolts that were happening here against the ratification of NAFTA, which is in many ways a landmark treaty in this worldwide expansion of the neoliberal system. But the image itself, the very structure of the image, speaks about the enormous class contradictions that are still marking our world, in spite of political attempts to label these conflicts as things of the past. The image also exposes the class-based character of culture and reminds us of the imperfect tools we deal with in our games of representation and critique. This leads us closer to the present, when, after the end of the first post-89 decade, in the face of rising questions about the viability of the neoliberal model and its status as a tool for Western hegemony, a handful of different oppositional models multiplied yet again. From the state-directed capitalist development of China to various attempts in a number of Latin American countries to reimagine social justice in a more accommodating relationship with global capitalism, to various degrees of success. But nonetheless, ideas of progress today are being put forward with a stronger drive and confidence. Again, in spite of the very often problematic formulation of some of these propositions. So I got the paper, so I will skip this wag. I'll go to another striking photograph of Mauro Restife, a Brazilian photographer. And it's a photographic series taken at two separate inaugurations, though in many ways related in their messianic and celebratory atmosphere. The first one that you see here is the inauguration of the Brazilian president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, in 2003. And the next one is the inauguration of Barack Obama in 2008. The former exposes the conflicts and contradictions of the massive popular celebration caused by the inauguration of the first president from a working class background against the backdrop of the capital, of Brasilia. The great failure of organized modernist progress seen from the perspective of its urban realization. But here there's actually something more, because I think the level of contradictions in the image is multiple, because from a certain point of view, the great promise of Brasilia, of that city, was met in that particular moment. That was the moment when Brasilia came of age, when Brasilia was actually finished. From a partially symbolic point of view, but not only symbolic, because that was the great promise of a new Brazil, of a more social, inclusive, modern country. And the election of Lula was in many ways indeed just that, an end of an oligarchic Brazil. The image of Obama allows for it's more of an analysis of masses and individuals and their respective historical agencies on the backdrop of the Washington Monument, which is never captured in its entirety in the series. Yet certain visions of progress do not become narratives and do not always succeed in crossing the barriers of language and representation, with all the power, relations, and hierarchies a communication act entails, even between agents mastering seemingly common codes. The discipline of post-colonial studies has extensively debated the question of speech and communication, describing different models of agencies. I will maybe skip this because of the time remaining. And let's go back to the image of Van den Eyde, his allegory of Europe. Because in the age when the sculpture was created, Europe was representing itself and the rest of the world through narratives of progress that were meant to underline its own preeminence, as mentioned before. And today, when the building that houses this representation has just lost its original public function, Europe as such has long ceased to be the world's hegemonic center. Having dissolved first of all, in a post-war era into a notion of a West, an entity borrowing many aspects of Europe's former sense of entitlement, but corresponding to a different geography, a specific ideology, and certainly a new epoch. And this West is now exhausting its last resources of legitimacy. But very much like Europe in 1924, or the West of the Cold War, today's West still needs to represent itself in contrast to the rest of the world in order to convince itself and others that it remains at the forefront of progress. But unlike in 1924, today's neoliberal brand of progress is repackaging decay and confusion throughout the West. And what the exhibition tried was to point to this, to this contradiction by repeating the very strategy of the builders of Utrecht's post office, in placing the ghost of Europe in a mirroring game with images, with energies, and with representations from the rest of the world. Those that have emerged from this vague elsewhere, when viewed from the still very much condescending vantage point of Europe. And through such a constellation, the path of this long suspect notion of progress becomes less clear, and the distribution of winners and losers across the globe even less so. Thank you.
Thank you, Cosmin. Ahora vamos a la presentación de Carlos Mota, un artista radicado en Nueva York cuya práctica multidisciplinaria explora la construcción de subjetividades personales y sociales que reconocen la inserción de historias, comunidades e identidades suprimidas. Su trabajo ha sido presentado en el Museo Guggenheim de Nueva York, MoMA PS1 Contemporary Art Center, Nueva York, y el Instituto de Arte Contemporáneo de Filadelfia. Cedo la palabra a Carlos Mota.
¿Me oyen? ¿Sí? Bueno, yo también quisiera agradecer a Shuddha y al equipo de SITAC por la invitación. Me da mucho gusto estar acá. Yo voy a estar dando una presentación que está basada en un proyecto colaborativo con un artista que se llama Bruno Lagomarsino. Así que las ideas que voy a estar presentando son producto de una larga conversación que duró más o menos unos 7 u 8 meses y se presentó como prefacio de un libro que realizamos juntos que se titula El futuro dura para siempre. En noviembre del 2010, en una de las paredes exteriores del Museo de Arte Contemporáneo de Atenas, apareció un grafiti que decía «El futuro dura para siempre», que había sido pintado al día siguiente de la inauguración de la política del arte. El grafiti estaba relacionado con las protestas habituales durante la crisis económica griega, pero en el contexto del museo también se leía como un gesto de escepticismo hacia el arte político que se exhibía en ese preciso momento dentro de la institución. Habíamos estado pensando cómo llamar nuestro libro, que reúne hipótesis e ideas de artistas y teóricos latinoamericanos acerca del futuro de Latinoamérica. Y la frase era afín con nuestra intención, así que decidimos utilizarla, ya que estamos especialmente interesados en la manera como el futuro se ha imaginado desde la calle y desde el campo del arte en Latinoamérica. El futuro dura para siempre es una expresión abierta que señala la ambigüedad y las múltiples formas de abordar un tema tan vasto como es el futuro. Generar ideas acerca del futuro es en sí una especie de paradoja. Si pensamos en imaginar el futuro de Latinoamérica, por ejemplo, nos encontramos con que hay tantas representaciones de Latinoamérica como hay representaciones e ideas del futuro mismo. Elaborar hipótesis sobre el futuro de Latinoamérica es imposible si no se emplea un lente crítico para repensar cómo y desde qué perspectivas se han escrito sus historias y sus visiones. El futuro dura para siempre, como afirma Roberto Jacobí en su entrevista para nuestro libro, significa que, comillas, en marzo de 2004, cuando el presidente Kirchner da la orden de bajar los retratos de los dictadores Videla y Viñone que colgaban en las paredes de las instituciones militares, en ese momento se conjugan pasado, presente y futuro. En ese preciso momento están las 3 instancias del tiempo histórico. El futuro dura para siempre nos recuerda también de Zhou Enlai, el primer ministro chino, quien se encontraba en Ginebra en 1953 con motivo de las negociaciones de paz para poner fin a la guerra de Corea, y respondió a un periodista francés que le preguntó qué pensaba acerca de la Revolución Francesa, y dijo: aún es muy pronto para saber. Y el futuro dura para siempre también evoca la historia de un hombre boliviano que durante una marcha en apoyo a la nueva constitución de ese país llevó una bandera norteamericana en su zapato. Estaba realizando una protesta individual dentro de la protesta colectiva. Había lucha en su zapato. El futuro se encuentra allí, entre el zapato y el pie. La idea de que el futuro se encuentra entre el zapato y el pie sugiere que somos responsables de su construcción. El futuro se encuentra en cada paso que damos. El futuro será solamente el producto del presente y un reflejo del pasado. La dificultad de imaginar el futuro es interesante, y especialmente el futuro de Latinoamérica, una región tan vasta caracterizada por la inequidad social y económica y las historias de opresión. Lo que torna imposible imaginar el futuro son los diferentes marcos conceptuales que hemos concebido culturalmente para hacerlo: la ciencia ficción, las utopías, las distopías, etc. Tal vez imaginar el futuro requiere permanecer al margen de esos sistemas de pensamiento. ¿Cómo puede uno pensar en el futuro más allá de la idea de lo que se supone que es el futuro? Como pensadores críticos, tenemos un profundo descreimiento con respecto a las narrativas históricas referentes a Latinoamérica. Esas visiones hegemónicas, a saber, la conquista, el colonialismo, la opresión, la intervención de Estados Unidos, etc., deben ser cuestionadas, no con el fin de negar que dichos acontecimientos se hayan producido, sino para definirlos como por lo que realmente fueron y no como han sido narrados singularmente por la historia, con H mayúscula. Quizás el futuro es un sitio y un tiempo de revisión y de asumir la responsabilidad por nuestra insensata irresponsabilidad histórica. Narrativas históricas son cuestionadas a diario en Latinoamérica. Desde las madres de la Plaza de Mayo, que no solo han retado el status quo en Argentina sistemáticamente a lo largo de 30 años, sino que también han redefinido estrategias de resistencia para los movimientos sociales de toda la región, hasta el llamado giro a la izquierda, el cambio político que se ha producido en la última década en Latinoamérica y ha deseado modificar de forma muy consciente la identidad oficial de varios países. Se pueden encontrar ejemplos de batallas contra las fuerzas del poder hegemónico. Cómo se nombra un lugar, cómo se articula y quién lo hace es crucial, pero evitar las trampas del nacionalismo y del proteccionismo es igualmente importante. Debe haber estrategias de resistencia preparadas para construir un nosotros más integrador, no solo para construir un discurso sobre el futuro, sino realmente para cambiar el presente. El cineasta checo Jan Svankmajer sugirió que, comillas, la imaginación es subversiva porque enfrenta a lo posible con lo real, cierro comillas. Así pues, enfrenta lo real o el peso y la responsabilidad por las acciones del pasado con el futuro o el aligeramiento potencial de ese peso a través de la rectificación de nuestras acciones. La imaginación por sí sola no nos lleva muy lejos. Es necesario poner esos imaginarios a trabajar para influenciar y cambiar la realidad. La lección que se deriva de los numerosos movimientos sociales en Latinoamérica es que la imaginación y la acción son avenidas de esperanza, no para hacer un mundo mejor, sino para hacer un mundo bueno. Las acciones y reclamos de las madres de la Plaza de Mayo, por ejemplo, son profundamente políticas porque las madres se organizaron para denunciar y rechazar a las fuerzas del silencio e igualaron el silencio con aceptar las muertes de sus hijos. Las madres actúan desde un lugar emocional, el dolor, y transforman ese dolor en una acción política organizada. Esa clase de acción política es el futuro. El futuro es un proceso de rectificación a través del uso de la estrategia y la imaginación. ¿Cómo imaginar una posición con respecto a la idea de la acción desde el campo del arte? Se pueden crear pequeños espacios de resistencia en un campo constituido tan claramente por un discurso neoliberal. ¿Cómo formular el espacio entre la acción y el pensamiento, entre la imaginación y el movimiento? Las obras de arte pueden operar precisamente en la intersección entre la imaginación y el movimiento, y en el punto de convergencia entre la reflexión y la acción. Una acción artística puede tener un compromiso social y cuestionar lo político, puede resistir e infligir, puede denunciar y transformar imaginarios. La historia del arte latinoamericano abunda en estas instancias, particularmente en las décadas de los 70 y 80. Basta pensar en las acciones reveladoras del grupo CADA, en el poder simbólico del siluetazo en Argentina, la apertura democrática de los parangolés de Helio Viticica en las calles de Río, o las performances callejeras de Asco en Los Ángeles, por mencionar tan solo unos pocos ejemplos en los cuales el arte y las ideas fueron política y acción. La intersección de la acción y la imaginación, o quizá podríamos llamarlo las posiciones de movimientos, son algo central en el arte, un circuito cerrado continuo que cambia de maneras poco perceptibles, como una grieta o como un desplazamiento. Sin embargo, en el arte, la representación de ese movimiento no debe ser siempre el ideal. Pensemos, por ejemplo, en la acción de Francis Alice cuando la fe mueve montañas, en la cual 500 voluntarios provistos de palas formaron una hilera al pie de una duna de arena gigantesca en las afueras de Lima, Perú, y se les pidió que movieran una cierta cantidad de arena una cierta distancia, desplazando de ese modo una duna de arena de 1.600 pies de largo, aproximadamente 4 pulgadas de su posición original. Se podría interpretar esta cadena humana como una metáfora de lo imposible o de la lentitud del cambio, o de la importancia de las acciones de un cuerpo colectivo. Pero la obra también es una exposición paradójica del minimalismo y del megalomanismo. La obra, sin embargo, no es una representación de ninguna de estas interpretaciones. La obra es, en realidad, el acontecimiento, el desplazamiento de la montaña misma. La política y la poética de este hecho convergen en la puesta en práctica del acontecimiento. Mientras trabajábamos en este texto en otoño del 2010, en Nueva York se convirtió en una sede de protesta política y disenso. Un número inmenso de personas descontentas con el capitalismo y la injusticia económica ocuparon Zuccotti Park bajo el nombre Ocupa Wall Street. Las protestas no tuvieron que ver con un reclamo o mensaje específico. La ocupación fue el mensaje y tuvo que ver con la radical reconstrucción de un buen presente con el futuro en mira. La protesta como mensaje se relaciona con reconocer y expresar la naturaleza matizada del sistema y su manifestación como una especie de pulpo hambriento que lo devora todo con sus tentáculos. La protesta como mensaje se relaciona con la resistencia como una forma de disenso y una manera de construir nuevas avenidas para el futuro. Durante una de las protestas, Brian Holmes habló en el parque utilizando la configuración del micrófono humano y dijo, entre comillas, «Tomará un largo tiempo construir un futuro mejor, pero a lo largo del camino debemos mantener esa llama encendida». Al pronunciar esas palabras, Holmes nos recordó que los sueños de la izquierda son siempre hermosos. Además, nos recordó que el futuro es, de hecho, la forma en que nos comprometemos con el presente. El futuro del capitalismo es su rectificación hacia un orden más justo. El futuro del sistema reside en identificar sus inequidades de múltiples matices y oponerse responsablemente a ellas. El futuro está siendo escrito a diario. Pensando en el contexto de Latinoamérica, la construcción del futuro es también un tema apremiante. La expansión del mundo, el desarrollo del mercado y de la mano de obra, teniendo en cuenta en primer lugar la esclavitud, y la construcción de naciones-estados fueron recibiendo un fuerte énfasis durante la colonización de las Américas, como lo explica Walter Mignolo. Excuse me. Vuelvo a empezar que me perdí. Pensando en el contexto de Latinoamérica, la construcción del futuro es también un tema apremiante. La expansión del mundo, el desarrollo del mercado y la mano de obra, teniendo en cuenta en primer lugar la esclavitud, y la construcción de naciones-estado fuertes recibieron un fuerte énfasis durante la colonización de las Américas. Como lo expresa Walter Mignolo, la colonización de las Américas es la otra cara de la modernidad. El futuro de Latinoamérica es la narración y la renarración del discurso colonial y poscolonial a manera de herramienta filosófica para comprender el pasado y como un arma política para la vida contemporánea. Estas estrategias proveen una manera de examinar las estructuras hegemónicas impuestas por el colonialismo en la región. Para comprender la historia colonial, debemos reconocer su presencia matizada en todo el continente. También es necesario que miremos desde varios ángulos, más allá de las dicotomías convencionales, para poder captar aquellas cosas que quedan escondidas en las grietas. Tomemos otro ejemplo que es un tema muy relevante para nosotros: la narración, conceptualización y materialización del arte político en América Latina. ¿Cómo se ha historiado esta forma de producción de arte desde los años 60 hasta el presente? El relato del arte latinoamericano ha sido en gran medida un proceso ideológico, hablando en términos de proporcionalidad como el de la conquista o el colonialismo. La historia oficial del arte latinoamericano se ha escrito siguiendo los cánones europeos y norteamericanos, y esa historización ha estado a manos de historiadores, críticos y coleccionistas de arte con un gusto occidental. Esfuerzos recientes para recontextualizar la producción artística regional han mostrado la relevancia de las perspectivas locales, ya sea que respondan o no a movimientos estéticos internacionales. En la última década, la red Conceptualismos del Sur, Luis Kamnitzer o Jennifer Flores Ternat, por nombrar solo tres, han hecho esfuerzos intelectuales para construir una contranarrativa conceptual que se oponga al discurso modernista dominante. Red Conceptualismos del Sur hace esto de una forma interesante, evitando y criticando la transformación en fetiches común en obras de corte político de las décadas de 1960 al 80, y reactivándolas al poner el énfasis en la fecha y localización específica de dichas obras, pero al mismo tiempo insertando las obras en un discurso contemporáneo crítico. Su estrategia es una declaración postcolonial del potencial político de la hibridación. Una hibridación que concuerda muy bien con el título paradójico de una de las obras de Francis Alice. A veces hacer algo poético puede transformarse en algo político, y a veces hacer algo político puede transformarse en algo poético. La historia del arte político de Latinoamérica demuestra de hecho la relación entre movimiento y acción. El arte latinoamericano ha estado profundamente entrelazado con las realidades sociales, étnicas, económicas y políticas de la región, y ha creado futuros, en plural, de esperanza, poesía política y cambio por medio de acción en pequeña escala. El futuro necesita ser escrito, pero la cuestión más desafiante en este momento es ¿qué queremos que sea el futuro? Imaginamos un futuro en términos políticos, ecológicos, sociales o culturales, pero la historia demuestra continuamente que los sueños de unos son las pesadillas de otros. A manera de conclusión, abordamos y proponemos una tesis. Debemos resistir los conceptos totalizadores, y tal vez la categoría futuro sea un concepto totalizador. Existen tantos futuros como realidades presentes. Imaginamos que depende de nosotros identificarnos colectivamente con una forma de vida que consideramos digna de vivir y construir nuestro futuro sobre las bases de esas creencias. Gracias.
Gracias, Carlos. Acordamos hacer una mecánica, una estrategia, una táctica de hacer una discusión primero entre los miembros del panel por un tiempo. Las contribuciones han sido exactamente, incluso un poco menos del tiempo que les dedicamos, que asignamos para ellas. Entonces quisiera más bien brindarles la palabra a ustedes, to give you the opportunity to interact with your ideas, with some pointers, probably provoke something. Something that really came into my mind with all your contributions is, in a way, thinking about your time capsules. I think how many of these time capsules are actually time bombs. Because, there's a certain moral liberty that you get with a time capsule. And related to all your things, I was thinking we can't really avoid embracing any culture or even any thinking system to make a possible or a possible time bomb in a way.
No, and in response to that, there's an interesting curiosity, and it's nice that you bring it up. Pendre was the name of the man who sort of devised one of the first major time capsules in the 1939 New York World Fair. It's a huge undertaking. And the first term to be proposed, what they would call this, was a time bomb, which then was replaced with a more sort of docile time capsule. So, I mean, it is in a sense time bomb. I think that you could do, if you wanted to, you could probably do a little bit of harm with this. But I don't know how many out there are actually time bombs. And if they are, they have most likely been forgotten, because most are, simply.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that, embracing an idea, sometimes we think, related to your talk, that ideas do not occupy a space. Somehow they are coexist. Whereas in the physical world, you can put two bottles in the same space. Ideas can coexist, supposedly. But somehow I believe that there is an actual physical metaphor there that could be counter to your conclusion.
Yeah, and I guess one of the points that I was trying to make is how generally when we think of the history of Latin America, there is this very homogenizing predominant narrative that has been set forth by history with capital H, and that has taken all the space, like physically and metaphorically. But at the same time, there are all these other counter narratives that have been, attempting to surface or to resurface in some ways, and those have been, of course, relegated to a place of there's no site for that. So I guess what we're trying to suggest is that there are these instances in which those counter narratives have been piercing the dominant system of thought and breaking down that system, that dominant way of thinking about concepts such as the future, for example, is the way of the future, if you will.
Any comments? I mean,
we agree.
You agree, but
I actually agree.
okay. So there goes my provocation.
Okay, but then I can ask the following. I mean, how could you take this further? I mean, in the sort of exhibition modus operandi to illustrate that these alternative narratives have existed and they still exist. Is there another way than the means of constructing an exhibition that these things could be sort of take on a broader spectrum? Is that a part of the plan of the future of this sort of scheme?
Yeah, well, I guess none of the examples that we attempted to give in these texts are actually related to constructing exhibitions. They actually take place out on the street. So if you think of Las Madres or some of the things that we talked about, these are things that have actually very little to do with art, other than the fact that perhaps they use some creative strategies of resistance. But I think and that's the place where those counter-narratives are enacted. And what was happening in New York, I think it's a very good example, and other places, but my experience was centered in New York. It's a good example of the space that can, how that narrative can be really pierced by this collective enactment of resistance, if you to those narratives, even if they are misrepresented and put down and disregarded as naive or whatnot.
Many of the comments regarding this movement in the United States were about the lack of definition, even by people who went there almost to lecture them. I remember Zizek saying almost the opposite to what you quoted from Harvey, saying, I don't want you 20 years from now remembering how great it was to be in the Occupy Wall Street demonstrations. I related a little bit with your failed utopias that you so poignantly delivered to us, and their plastic expression in sculptures.
But I wanted actually to go to Theodore with I mean, if we have to provoke each other, because you said, like, how can these things be taken further? How can they be expressed in a different way than in an exhibition? And I'm interested about this construction. Why would you immediately imply that an exhibition is not enough as such? Or like, what does this actually tell us, this kind of construction?
No, I understand what you mean. I think it's just sort of my personal search for other ways, simply. I think that if we talk about a dominating narrative, I think that in a way the construction of exhibitions is a dominating narrative, and you can construct an exhibition in many different ways. And I think it's more to do with me and my sort of longing for experimenting with other modes, other mentalities, other manifestations, and I think that it's important to always consider that it's like a work of art. I mean, just because it's a good idea doesn't mean that it needs to become a work of art. It could be something else, and just because it could turn into an exhibition. And I understand that there's so many of the examples that you bring up that aren't exhibitions. And I'm referring mostly to the show that you and Runo did in Sweden called The Future Lasts Forever. But I think in response to your question, it's simply about me and my sort of longing for a way of thinking other than the exhibition, simply, and the book, because that seems to be the common way. If you don't want to make an exhibition, you sort of make a book instead. And I think that we need to try to sort of push this a little bit, at least. Was that provoking enough? I don't know.
Not enough to take it further, so I guess we're like a bit too cordial here. I was stretching it anyhow with my question.
So, given the result, I want perhaps to open it to the public, which are, of course, anxious to participate. And Shura would like to. Here comes.
Thank you, first of all, for such a rich set of presentations with many questions, and I particularly enjoyed the back and forth between all of you. I have a question that I want to flag as a concern, and it's not specific to anyone, but and it arises a little bit from Cosmin's presentation, but I want all of you to think about it. My question is, could it be that the critique of European hegemony is also an instance of the continuation of European hegemony? The reason I'm asking this, and this is something that happens a lot in our parts of the world and in sensitive contexts in Europe, because we are so eager to exorcise the ghosts of colonialism that all other projects have to be deferred or to wait until this one is first done. Which means that, and I found your exhibition, Cosmin, quite interesting as an instance of this problematic, and I want you to talk a little bit about it. Will we have to wait forever for the completion of the critique of European experience to occur in order to undertake other criticisms? Because there will be criticisms that are necessary, or there are criticisms that are necessary of the historic experience of other parts of the world which may have a relationship to Europe, but are also, since the second half of the 20th century, also, they have their own ballast. And I mean, the same would apply for Latin America. I mean, these are ticking time bombs, in a sense that the postponement of a criticism of post-colonialism is also something that I sometimes feel is overdue.
It's a very, very important point, and it was like one of the main things I had in mind when I did the exhibition. That's the part I skipped in the critique of the post-colonial studies because of the lack of time. Well, to answer first from the perspective of the exhibition tried to deal with this question basically by a number of works, which I didn't actually present in a way, and the image of the show is necessarily very incomplete. Because the point of many works, and that's why I think the reaction of the exhibition was quite mixed, because what was actually seen there was not immediately, following the clear dogma as such of which I was partially endorsing. There was a presence of the subjective very strongly in the exhibition, which was primarily meant indeed to liberate the people represented from a constant agent of struggle. There was a presence of Federico Herrero, which in a way his liberating abstraction, his denial of immediate representation of the real was in a way, or like I chose to read it or to place it as a kind of emancipation of the subject from a need to be constantly emancipating oneself. There was an amazing short film by Apichat Pongwirastakun that had already this contradiction in the film as well. It's a multiple game of speaking and a turning upside down of a question it was a celebration of a perceived impossibility of a subaltern to speak, I would say, in a very sensual way. And in a way that was simultaneously liberating. But these are somehow just examples. I would also say that the overall construction of the exhibition also tried to approach Europe with a sort of candor as well. Because it was also, and this is I think quite important if you look at the moment, because it was at a moment when Europe was proclaiming by itself its demise. It was really in a moment when you don't hit somebody who is already fallen. It's not an act of chivalry, if you want. So definitely the exhibition was not meant, and by this I just would try to move away to the exhibition, was not meant to be a critique of European hegemonic power. It was an attempt to bring together the different possible ways of the different agents looking at each other, and all the limitations and risks that each part of the spectrum and each of the position entails. So I fully endorse the complexity that you rose in this question. And indeed, one has to move on from an orthodox post-colonial logics for a number of reasons. And what you mentioned is only one of these reasons, and one we can actually list even more issues that arise from here.
Except it seems really difficult to move on from when the means of, when language and the means of investigation have been set precisely along the line of that European hegemonic structures of knowledge, if you will. So I find your question really puzzling in the sense that I think it's incredibly important to be able to construct a critique of post-colonialism and post-colonialism, except we don't have the language to engage in that without falling in the trap of the hegemonic language to begin with. So even if those languages exist and those cultures have arisen in different spaces, there isn't a space intellectually to engage them in different terms within a kind of dominant discourse that we are all inhabiting.
I mean, we can always go back to classical Marxism.
Let's.
And to to realize that a critique of class is the fundamental struggle in our societies.
Yeah, but that is fundamentally a European hegemonic construction.
No.
No?
No.
You want a conflict?
Well, I want to give...
Bueno, muchas gracias para los ponentes. Yo quisiera nada más agregar un punto sobre lo que estaban hablando, relacionando a la ponencia de la mañana que habló de los límites de la representación. Yo creo que si hay una crisis mantenido en la oralitura, y esa oralitura ha hecho que sus tradiciones hayan enfrentado la colonización y ningún idioma se ha perdido. Y gracias a esos idiomas las tradiciones se respetan y permiten vivir mejor. En ese sentido, yo creo que eso pasa en el campo de las artes. Quien revisa su legado propio se dará cuenta de todo lo negado o ultrajado por Occidente para revisar, bucear permanentemente erguido, con racionalidad y decir, esto que quisieron borrar es valioso y es trascendente, hay que recuperarlo. Y eso lo puede hacer uno en todo el urbe mundial. O sea, nosotros decimos, todos son africanos bajo la piel, porque salieron de nuestro continente. Entonces todo nos pertenece, nada humano nos es ajeno. Y si vamos en ese camino, creo que podríamos recuperar de lo humano lo que Occidente todavía sigue especulando. Lo que dice Shuddha, de que hay que esperar o no. Yo creo que no hay que esperar, Shuddha. Hay que responder a Occidente en los términos más claros, intelectuales, de que ya basta. Si no somos nosotros, no sería. Gracias a la explotación, gracias a la esclavitud, gracias a muchos imperialismos y conquistas, Europa es lo que es hoy. Y en la tradición del hombre hay que reconocer que somos imperialistas. Gracias.
Very briefly, just to provoke the conversation a little further, I also want us to think a little bit about the fact that countries like Brazil, India, Mexico are hegemons, and they will construct worlds of hegemony. And one way in which the postponement of the criticism of these hegemonic powers occurs is through a constant gesture towards the oppression of Europe. It's something for us to think about.
Anyone want to respond to these two contributions? No? No response? I don't know about the time. I think we're a bit on. Okay. I can't see anything. Just
one sentence to add to Shuddha, and besides Indian and Brazil and Mexico being hegemonic, it's the class. I mean, having an oppressive class in Ethiopia, for example, and an oppressive class in everywhere, almost. And that's an important factor to take into account.
Bueno, acá una pregunta. Igual estoy poniendo como mucha atención a lo mejor en un pequeño detalle, pero me llamó mucho la atención y es una pregunta específica para Carlos. Estoy de acuerdo en que la construcción del relato historiográfico es un dispositivo de poder atravesado por muchísimos intereses, eso no está en duda, pues, ¿no? También en relación a lo que dice Eri. Me llamó la atención esta parte final de tu participación en la que hablas de algunos ejercicios que intentan desestabilizar, digamos, como esta construcción del relato. Hablabas de la red de conceptualismos del sur, de la que al menos 3 o 4 personas acá formamos parte, y me pareció muy curioso el uso de imágenes que hiciste hacia el final. A lo mejor es una nimiedad, no lo sé, pero te quiero preguntar, ¿por qué haces este salto cuántico o por qué haces esta especie de relación, al menos en imágenes, entre la imagen de Roberto Jacobi, con toda su capacidad, digamos, de intervención política a través de sus producciones, y por qué pasas después a Adriana Lara como un siguiente episodio? Digo, igual no sé, a lo mejor es una nimiedad, me parece un detalle que quisiera simplemente, porque la construcción de las imágenes son también un dispositivo de poder y de articulación, que solamente exploraras un poquito por qué lo hiciste.
Sí. No, hay algo, digamos que mi presentación de las imágenes corresponde a un ejercicio que hicimos con Bruno en la construcción de este libro y esta exposición, y tanto Jacobí como Adriana Lara son parte de la exposición. Entonces pienso que el uso que hice de ellas fue en relación a la manera como fueron presentadas dentro de esos dos discursos. No, digamos que no, tal vez es un conocimiento que he debido compartir antes de presentar las imágenes, pero la idea era hacer una reflexión al espacio expositivo en el que Adriana Lara estaba presente y el espacio discursivo en el que Jacobí estaba presente. O sea que fue realmente como una reflexión de ese contexto, más que querer construir una hegemonía como lo estás postulando.
Tenemos tiempo para una pregunta más del público, de los participantes del simposio. ¿Alguien?
Pues se me ocurrió ahorita una pregunta para aprovechar el tiempo. Porque pues ya no había preguntas por ahí. La pregunta es con respecto a las cajas. No sé si la pregunta es para el primer participante, el curador. Si cree que, por decir esto, la colonia española cuando llega a México, a Mesoamérica, pone sus iglesias sobre templos o entierra las mismas, o los mismos mesoamericanos enterraban sus piezas, hay una relación de que se empiezan a descubrir, por decir, en el siglo XX, y estuvieron como ocultas. O bueno, no puedo decir el tiempo así específico, ¿verdad? Pero me acuerdo mucho de la Tlatecuhtli que acaban de descubrir en el Zócalo. Entonces no sé si haya una relación con lo que pensaste de tú enterrar para ver quién lo encontraba después o... Bueno, eso sería todo.
Well, if the echo comes through correctly, yes, of course. I mean, you always have to think that is that's the difficulty, because I mean we're thinking 50 years in the future, and 50 years is very little. But of course, these construction upon construction is what the layers beneath. That's time capsules of sort as well. I mean, there's so much that we could call a time capsule. I mean, William Jarvis, which is a time capsule expert, has a very definite sort of definition of what it is. But I mean, when construction builders found John Lennon's secret stash of LSD, that was referred to as a time capsule, in a way. So time capsules, any exhibition is a time capsule. I mean, it's a periodical event that has a beginning and an end. But the whole process of sequestering something, of hiding something, it can be done intentionally or unintentionally. Pompeii is what they call a natural time capsule, because it's sort of contained and we can learn from it. And I think that all of these instances where sort of architecture builds on old other architecture is very interesting, and it should definitely be treated as such. If that's what you wanted. But and I mean, my thoughts of the people of the future, the 50-year people from now, I mean, I'm hopefully part of that in a way, in a small way. But yeah, it's an intellectual, mental exercise to just try to exist in another time, in another place.
Perdón, nada más quería hacer una precisión. Tlatecuhtli es una diosa mexica que siempre mira hacia abajo, hacia el inframundo. Siempre el mexica pone a Tlatecuhtli con la cara hacia abajo porque come y expurga vida. Entonces el que encontraron en el templo mayor los españoles no llegaron a verlo porque fue antes de que llegaron. Y siempre lo ponen, incluso cuando convirtieron las piedras prehispánicas en columnas de la catedral. Si ve la base de la catedral que está en el templo mayor, Tlatecultli está en la base de la catedral. Los prehispánicos cuidaron que sus dioses siguieran detrás de los altares haciendo su tarea. Entonces no hay que confundir las cosas.
Are we finished?
I think we are. Well, muchas gracias a todos. Thank you very much. We are right on time and looking forward for the next. Thanks. Gracias a todos.